The entire theater went silent after just 10 seconds. Simon raised his hand. Stop. Stop the music. You could actually hear someone gasp in the audience. Before we begin, I want you to imagine being on the biggest stage of your life, thousands watching, cameras inches from your face, your family praying back home, and then being stopped before you even get started. What would you do? Would you walk away? Or would you fight for your dream? Stay with me until the end, because what happened next didn't just shock the judges, it changed one man's life forever. And if stories of courage and second chances inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might be the one that changes you. His name was Mateo Reyes. 34 years old. Born and raised in Cebu, Philippines. He grew up in a tiny house with a tin roof that rattled every time it rained. His father was a jeepney driver. His mother sold homemade lumpia outside a local school. Money was always tight, but music was free. Mateo's earliest memory was of his father playing old cassettes of Elvis Presley on a battered tape player. "Listen to that voice," his father would say. "That's not just singing. That's feeling." By age 8, Mateo was copying Elvis in front of a cracked mirror, using a broom as a microphone. He practiced the lip curl, the hip sway, the swagger. But more than that, he practiced the emotion. Life, however, doesn't always clap for your dreams. When Mateo was 16, his father suffered a stroke. Suddenly, the boy who once sang in school talent shows had to quit and work construction to help support the family. The mirror was replaced with cement dust. The broom microphone became a shovel. Years passed. His hands grew rough. His voice, surprisingly, grew stronger. At night, after 12-hour shifts, he would sit outside their small home and sing quietly. Neighbors began gathering. Someone filmed him once and uploaded it online. The video reached a Filipino community group in Los Angeles. Donations trickled in. Encouragement followed. "You should audition," one message said. "You belong on a real stage." Mateo laughed at first. Him? On America's Got Talent? That stage felt galaxies away from Cebu. But his mother, now older and slower, placed her thin hand over his. "Anik," she whispered, "your father believed in that voice. So he borrowed money. Sold his old motorbike. Applied for a visa. Flew for the first time in his life. 34 years old, with one suitcase and a second-hand white jumpsuit stitched by a local tailor trying his best to recreate Elvis's iconic look. Backstage at AGT, Mateo's hands were shaking. The producers adjusted his mic. A stylist teased his thick black hair into a modest pompadour. He looked at himself in the mirror, not a construction worker, not a struggling son, but a performer. When he stepped onto the stage, the lights nearly blinded him. The crowd cheered politely at first. A Filipino flag waved somewhere in the audience. Simon leaned forward. Sophia smiled warmly. Howie tilted his head with curiosity. Heidi whispered, "Elvis?" Mateo introduced himself softly. "I am from the Philippines. I work construction. But today, I sing." The music started. He chose "Can't Help Falling in Love." But nerves are cruel. His first note wavered. Slightly off key. His breathing was tight. The second line cracked just enough for trained ears to notice. 10 seconds in, Simon lifted his hand. "Stop. Stop the music." The backing track faded into an uncomfortable silence. Mateo's heart dropped into his stomach. The audience murmured. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Oh no." Simon looked at him carefully. Not cruel. Not mocking. Just analytical. "I don't think that song was doing you any favors," Simon said. "Right now, it feels like an impression. I don't want an Elvis impersonator. I want you. Do you understand?" Mateo swallowed. His throat felt dry as sandpaper. "Yes, sir." Simon leaned back. "You have one shot. Choose a different song. Something that means something to you." The room held its breath. Backstage, producers looked panicked. Changing a song mid-audition was risky. But something in Mateo's eyes shifted. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something older. Something tougher. He thought of his father's stroke. His mother selling lumpia in the heat. The nights he sang to drown out exhaustion. He closed his eyes and said, "May I sing Suspicious Minds?" The band scrambled. The track cued. The opening beat hit. This time, Mateo didn't try to be Elvis. He was Mateo. His voice came out deeper. Grittier. Full of lived-in pain. The first verse rolled out steady, controlled. By the chorus, something electric filled the theater. His hips moved, not exaggerated, not forced, just natural rhythm. The lip curl appeared, but softer, like a respectful nod rather than a copy. And then he hit the big note. It wasn't just technically strong. It was honest. Raw. The kind of note that carries years of sacrifice inside it. The audience erupted mid-song. Sophia's jaw dropped. Heidi started clapping along. Howie's eyes widened. And Simon, the same man who stopped him, slowly began to smile. Mateo fed off the energy. Each note stronger than the last. He stepped forward, commanding the stage, no longer a nervous construction worker but a performer owning his moment. By the final chorus, the entire theater was on its feet. When he ended on that powerful sustained note, there was a half-second of stunned silence. Then the place exploded. A standing ovation. Mateo's chest heaved. Tears filled his eyes. He looked up as if searching the ceiling for someone unseen. Simon stood. "Now that," he said into the mic, "is why we stopped you." The crowd cheered louder. "You see," Simon continued, "the first performance was someone trying to be Elvis. The second performance was a star inspired by Elvis. And that's the difference." Mateo covered his face, overwhelmed. Sophia leaned forward. "Your story, your struggle, we felt it in your voice. That wasn't an act. That was your heart." Howie grinned. From construction worker to contender. For yes. But the moment didn't end there. As Mateo walked off stage, the cameras followed him backstage where he collapsed into tears. He called his mother on video chat. The connection was grainy. Her face filled the screen. "Nene," he said, voice shaking, "I did it." She cried openly. "Your father would be proud." That clip went viral within hours. Filipino communities across the world shared it. Overseas workers messaged him saying they felt seen. Construction workers posted videos singing his song during lunch breaks. Mateo advanced through the competition week after week. Each performance was less about impersonation and more about identity, blending classic Elvis style with Filipino soul. In the semifinals, he dedicated a song to migrant workers. In the finals, he wore a redesigned jumpsuit with subtle patterns inspired by traditional Filipino textiles. He didn't just represent himself anymore. He represented every dream delayed but not destroyed. Although he didn't win the grand prize, something bigger happened. A record producer approached him. A Vegas tribute show offered him a residency. More importantly, he earned something no trophy could give: belief. Months later, Mateo returned to Cebu. This time not as a laborer, but as a performer invited to headline a local concert. Thousands filled the plaza. Among them were construction workers still in dusty boots. He looked at the crowd and remembered that moment when Simon said, "Stop." 10 seconds that could have ended everything. Instead, they became the turning point. Because sometimes rejection isn't the end. Sometimes it's redirection. If Simon hadn't stopped him, Mateo might have walked away just another Elvis impersonator in a white suit. But being stopped forced him to reveal who he truly was. And maybe that's the message for you watching right now. Maybe you've been stopped. Maybe someone told you you're not ready. Not good enough. Not original enough. But what if that moment isn't your failure? What if it's your second chance to show the real you? Mateo's story reminds us that dreams don't expire because of age, poverty, or fear. They only fade when we stop trying. So if this story moved you, if you felt even a spark of hope, like this video so more people can see it. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary moments. And the next time life raises its hand and says stop, take a breath. Choose a new song. And sing it like your whole life depends on it. The music hadn't even reached the first chorus. 10 seconds. That's all it took. Simon lifted his hand. Stop. The word sliced through the theater like a blade. The track faded. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed in. And on that massive stage of America's Got Talent, a Filipino construction worker stood frozen under blinding lights. But what happened next, no one saw coming. Before we go further, I want you to put yourself in his shoes. Imagine chasing a dream for 20 years. Imagine flying across the world with borrowed money. Imagine your mother watching from thousands of miles away and then being stopped before you even begin. Would you crumble? Or would you rise? Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just another audition story. This is about what happens when rejection becomes the spark that changes everything. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because sometimes one story can light a fire you didn't know you needed. His name was Rafael Rafi Mendoza. 36 years old. From a small town outside Manila. The kind of place where everyone knows your name and your struggles. Rafi grew up poor. Not the poetic kind of poor you see in movies. The real kind. Shared beds. The buzzer didn't go off. The music didn't crash. There was no dramatic red X. It was quieter than that. 10 seconds into the song, Simon leaned forward, lifted his hand slightly, and said into the microphone, "Stop." And in that stillness, under the blazing lights of America's Got Talent, a 29-year-old Filipino man felt 20 years of dreaming hang in the balance. But what happened next, no one expected. Not the judges. Not the audience. Not even him. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about talent. It's about pride, pressure, family, and the moment you decide whether to break or become unbreakable. And if stories like this inspire you, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who needs to hear this today, maybe even you. His name was Daniel Cruz. Born in Davao City. The eldest of 4 siblings. His mother was a public school teacher. His father worked overseas for most of Daniel's childhood, sending money home from construction sites in the Middle East. Growing up, Daniel didn't have many luxuries. But he had music. On Sundays, while his mother graded papers, Daniel would play old recordings of Elvis Presley on their small speaker. He wasn't just fascinated by the voice, he was fascinated by the command. The way Elvis stood still and somehow filled an entire arena. At 12 years old, Daniel performed at a barangay fiesta dressed in a handmade white jumpsuit stitched from old curtains. The crowd laughed at first. Then he sang. By the end, they were cheering. That was the first time he felt it, that electricity between performer and audience. That invisible thread. But reality came quickly. When his father got injured abroad and could no longer work, Daniel's dreams quietly shifted. College became optional. Work became mandatory. He took jobs wherever he could, call centers, delivery driving, even part-time security shifts. Still, every night, he practiced. Not for fame. For escape. Years later, a friend secretly uploaded a video of Daniel singing Always on My Mind at a small wedding. The clip gained traction online, especially among Filipino communities abroad. Comments flooded in. You should audition. You belong on a bigger stage. You're world class. Daniel ignored them at first. Dreams felt irresponsible when bills were overdue. But one night, his mother said something that changed everything. Anik, she told him gently, you've been responsible your whole life. Maybe it's time to be brave. 3 months later, Daniel stood backstage at AGT. He wore a sharp white suit inspired by Elvis, and modern, fitted, respectful. His black hair was styled in a subtle pompadour. Around his neck hung a small gold cross his mother had given him before the flight. When he walked onto the stage, the applause was warm but cautious. Simon asked the usual questions. What do you do? I support my family, Daniel answered honestly. But I want to sing. And why Elvis? Simon asked. Daniel smiled slightly. Because when I was young, his voice made me feel like even someone far away could be heard. The music began. He chose Burning Love. The opening line came out strong but controlled. Almost too controlled. He was focused on precision. On perfection. On not embarrassing himself. 10 seconds in. Stop. The word echoed. The audience shifted. Daniel's stomach dropped. Simon looked thoughtful, not harsh. I feel like you're holding back, Simon said. You're good. Very good. But you're trying to sing it safely. This stage isn't about safe. It's about unforgettable. Daniel nodded slowly. Simon continued, do you have another song? There it was. The Crossroad. Daniel could stick to what he rehearsed. Or he could risk everything. He thought about his father watching online from their living room. About his siblings gathered around a small screen. About his mother praying. Yes, he said quietly. I'd like to sing something different. What? Simon asked. Daniel inhaled. If I can dream. The band adjusted. The lights dimmed slightly. The first note came out softer than before, but this time it wasn't cautious. It was vulnerable. He didn't focus on technique. He focused on meaning. When he sang about dreaming of a better land, it felt personal. Like a message sent across oceans. Like every overseas worker longing to come home. Like every Filipino child who ever felt invisible. Midway through the song, his voice began to rise, not just in pitch, but in power. The nerves melted. The fear disappeared. In its place stood a man who had carried responsibility for years and was finally allowing himself to feel. The high note approached. Instead of forcing it, he surrendered to it. And it soared. Clear. Strong. Emotional. The audience stood up before he even finished the final line. Heidi's mouth was open in shock. Sophia wiped her eyes. Howie clapped above his head. And Simon? Simon was smiling, that rare, impressed smile. When the last note faded, the silence lasted half a second longer than usual. Then the theater exploded. Daniel stood there trembling, not from fear anymore, but from release. Simon spoke first. That, he said calmly, is why I stopped you. The crowd cheered. You were hiding behind control. But when you let go, that was powerful. That was you. Daniel pressed his lips together, fighting tears. For yes. Backstage, he finally allowed himself to cry. Not because he had advanced, but because for the first time, he hadn't been the responsible one. He hadn't been the provider. He had just been Daniel. As the weeks went on, Daniel's performances grew bolder. He blended Elvis classics with subtle Filipino vocal runs. He told stories between songs. He stopped trying to be the Filipino Elvis. He became Daniel Cruz, inspired by Elvis, but rooted in his own culture and struggle. Social media began calling him the voice from home. Overseas Filipino workers sent videos of themselves watching his performances during night shifts. Nurses in London. Seafarers in Dubai. Caregivers in Canada. They all said the same thing. He sings what we feel. Daniel didn't win the whole competition. But he didn't lose either. After the show, he was offered a recording contract. He went on tour across Filipino communities worldwide. When he finally returned home, thousands greeted him at the airport. At his first major concert in Manila, his father sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Before singing his final song that night, Daniel told the crowd, "I was stopped after 10 seconds. And I thought it was over." But sometimes being stopped isn't rejection. It's direction. The arena fell silent. Sometimes, he continued, you're stopped because the world is waiting for the real you. And maybe that's the message for you watching right now. Maybe you've been interrupted. Corrected. Doubtful. Criticized. Maybe someone told you to stop. But what if that moment isn't the end of your story? What if it's the moment that pushes you to show your truth? Daniel was stopped after 10 seconds. And it became the most important 10 seconds of his life. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video so it can reach someone who needs courage today. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful emotional journeys that remind us all that dreams don't expire, they evolve. And remember, if life stops your first song, choose another. And sing it like you were born to be heard. Musical notes 10 seconds. That's all he got. The music had barely started echoing across the stage of America's Got Talent when Simon leaned forward, raised his hand, and said the word every contestant fears. Stop. The track cut off mid-lyric. The audience froze. And a 41-year-old Filipino father stood under the lights, heart pounding so loudly he was sure the microphones could hear it. But what happened after those 10 seconds turned into one of the most unforgettable moments of the season. Before we continue, I want you to imagine something. Imagine waiting your whole life for one opportunity. One stage. One chance to prove that your sacrifices meant something. And then, just as it begins, you're stopped. Would you walk away in shame? Or would you fight for one more breath of belief? Stay with me until the end, because this story isn't just emotional, it's a reminder that sometimes the worst moment becomes the doorway to your greatest one. And if stories like this move you, make sure to like the video and subscribe. You never know who needs this reminder today. His name was Ernesto Ernie Villanueva. 41 years old. From Iloilo City in the Philippines. Unlike the young dreamers chasing fame, Ernie's dream had been postponed for decades. In his early 20s, he had a band. They performed at weddings, fiestas, small hotel lounges. He was known locally as Elvis Ernie because of his deep baritone voice and natural stage presence inspired by Elvis Presley. But then life intervened. His wife became pregnant with their first child. Medical bills piled up. His father fell ill. The gigs weren't enough. So he left music behind. He worked as a mechanic. Then as a factory worker. Eventually, he became a bus driver. 12-hour shifts. Overtime on weekends. Singing was reduced to humming quietly behind a steering wheel while passengers scrolled on their phones. Years passed. His children grew up hearing stories about Papa's singing days, but they had never seen him perform on a real stage. One evening, his teenage daughter found an old video of him performing in 2003. She stared at the screen in disbelief. "Papa," she said softly, "why did you stop?" He didn't answer immediately. "Because sometimes dreams are expensive," he finally replied. She looked him straight in the eyes. "Then let us help you pay for this one." Without telling him, his children submitted his audition tape to AGT. Weeks later, an email arrived. Ernie thought it was spam. It wasn't. Backstage in America, at 41H. The crowd was ready to clap. The music had just begun. And then. Stop. No buzzer. No harsh sound effect. Just Simon's calm but cutting voice slicing through the air on the stage of America's Got Talent. 10 seconds. That's all he got. And in that tiny window of time, a 27-year-old Filipino delivery rider felt his entire life collapsing in front of millions. But what happened after those 10 seconds didn't just shock the judges, it rewrote his destiny. Before we go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever been stopped before you could fully begin? Ever felt judged before you had the chance to show who you really are? Stay with me until the end of this story, because it's proof that sometimes the interruption is the invitation. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because someone out there needs this reminder today. His name was Nico Alvarez. 27. From Quezon City. Skinny frame. Sharp cheekbones. Deep-set eyes that always looked a little tired. By day, Nico delivered food on a motorcycle through Manila traffic. Heat, rain, exhaustion, it didn't matter. If there was an order, he took it. By night, he sang. Not in arenas. Not in studios. On rooftops. In parking lots. Sometimes quietly inside his helmet while waiting at red lights. His father had once dreamed of becoming a singer. He idolized Elvis Presley not just for the voice, but for the confidence. That man walked like he owned the world, his father used to say. But poverty doesn't always allow room for dreams. When Nico was 14, his father passed away from a sudden illness. Medical bills swallowed everything. Nico quit school 2 years later to help support his mother and younger sister. Music became something private. Personal. A connection to the man he lost. One evening, while waiting for a delivery pickup, Nico started singing Can't Help Falling in Love absent-mindedly. Another writer recorded him and uploaded the clip. Within days, it spread across social media. Comments flooded in from Filipinos abroad. Why aren't you famous? You need to audition. You have that old soul voice. He laughed it off. But his little sister didn't. You always tell me to chase my dreams, she said. Why don't you chase yours? Months later, Nico stood backstage at AGT, heart racing faster than any motorcycle he had ever ridden. He wore a simple white shirt, black jeans, and a modest leather jacket, subtle tribute to Elvis without trying to imitate him. His black hair was slicked back neatly. Around his wrist was his father's old watch. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was warm but cautious. Simon leaned forward. And what do you do? I'm a delivery rider, Nico replied. And you're singing? Yes, sir. For my father. The audience softened. The music started. He chose Jailhouse Rock. The intro played. Nico tried to bring energy. But nerves crept in. His movements felt stiff. His voice, usually rich and smooth, sounded tight. 10 seconds. Simon raised his hand. Stop. The audience gasped. Nico froze mid-breath. Simon tilted his head slightly. You've got a good voice. But right now, you're trying to entertain us. I don't want karaoke. I want connection. The words hit harder than a red buzzer. Nico nodded slowly. Simon continued, Do you have another song? Something that means something to you? The stage felt heavier. The lights hotter. This was it. One more chance. Nico swallowed. Yes. May I sing If I Can Dream? The band reset. The theater quieted. This time, Nico didn't try to move like Elvis. He stood still. The first line came out soft. Almost fragile. But there was something different. It wasn't performance. It was memory. When he sang about dreaming of a better land, his voice trembled, not from fear, but emotion. He thought about delivering food to luxury condos while his family counted coins at home. He thought about his father humming Elvis songs in their tiny kitchen. Midway through the song, his voice began to grow. Stronger. Fuller. By the chorus, it wasn't just a tribute anymore. It was his story. The high note approached, the kind that separates good from unforgettable. He closed his eyes. And let go. The note soared through the theater, powerful, controlled, filled with ache and hope at the same time. The audience rose to their feet before he finished. Heidi clutched her chest. Sophia's eyes shimmered. Howie whispered, "Wow." And Simon? Simon smiled slowly, the kind of smile that means he knows he's witnessing something real. When Nico finished, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the explosion. A full standing ovation. Nico's chest heaved as he tried to process what just happened. Simon spoke first. "That," he said calmly, "is why I stopped you." The audience cheered. The first song was you trying to be impressive. The second song was you being honest. And honesty always wins. Tears filled Nico's eyes. For yes. Backstage, he called his mother and sister. They were screaming so loudly he had to pull the phone away from his ear. His sister kept repeating, "You did it. You did it." As the competition continued, Nico leaned fully into his identity. He blended classic Elvis influences with subtle Filipino vocal runs. He told his story between performances, about riding through storms, about singing into his helmet, about dreaming while delivering other people's dinners. He became known as the writer with a dream. He didn't win the entire competition. But after the show, everything changed. He was invited to perform in Filipino communities across the US and Canada. A music producer offered him a recording deal focused on soulful classics with modern emotion. His delivery company back home threw him a celebration party. Months later, Nico returned to Quezon City and organized a free concert for delivery riders and gig workers. Before his final song that night, he looked at the crowd and said, "I was stopped after 10 seconds. And I thought that was the end. But sometimes, being stopped is life asking you to dig deeper." The crowd cheered. "Don't let the first stop define your story," he continued. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of the real one. And maybe that message is for you. Maybe someone has interrupted your dream. Maybe you felt embarrassed. Doubtful. Small. But what if that moment isn't rejection? What if it's redirection?" Nico got 10 seconds. And he turned it into a lifetime. If this story inspired you, like this video so it can reach someone who needs courage right now. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that prove ordinary people can create extraordinary moments. And remember, if life stops your song, take a breath. Find your truth. And sing it like the world is finally listening. Musical notes. The crowd expected applause. The band had just hit the opening chord. And then, stop. No buzzer. No dramatic music. Just Simon's voice cutting cleanly through the air on the stage of America's Got Talent. 10 seconds. That was all the time he was given. And in those 10 seconds, a 33-year-old Filipino nurse felt his childhood dream slipping through his fingers. But what happened next didn't just shock the judges. It reminded millions of people watching why they never gave up on theirs. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just another audition story. This one is about sacrifice, silent battles, and the moment a man stopped performing and started believing. And if stories like this move you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. You never know who needs to hear this message today. His name was Adrian Morales. 33. From Bacolod City in the Philippines. Soft-spoken. Kind eyes. The type of person who listens more than he talks. By profession, he was a nurse. During the pandemic years, Adrian worked endless night shifts in overcrowded hospitals. He held the hands of strangers when their families couldn't be there. He watched people say goodbye through phone screens. He went home exhausted, emotionally drained, but he still sang. Music was his therapy. Growing up, Adrian's mother used to play vinyl records of Elvis Presley every Sunday morning. Their tiny living room would transform into a concert hall. Adrian, only 8 years old, would grab a spoon as a microphone and perform dramatically in front of the electric fan. "You sing with feeling," his mother used to tell him. "Don't ever lose that." But life, responsibilities, and long hospital shifts slowly pushed that dream aside. Until one night. After a particularly difficult shift, Adrian sat alone in the hospital break room and softly sang "Love Me Tender." A co-worker recorded it and posted it online with the caption, "Our nurse has the voice of an angel." The video spread quickly, especially among Filipino communities overseas. Comments flooded in. "Why aren't you on a big stage? You represent us. Please audition." Adrian hesitated. He wasn't chasing fame. He was just surviving. But one of his former patients, a young girl he had cared for, sent him a message. "You told me to fight for my life," she wrote. "Now you fight for your dream." That message changed everything. Months later, Adrian stood backstage at AGT. His hands were steady. Years of medical training taught him how to control nerves, but his heart raced. He wore a simple cream-colored suit with subtle gold detailing. Not flashy. Not exaggerated. Just elegant. His black hair was neatly styled. Around his neck was a small pendant his mother had given him before his flight. When he walked onto the stage, the applause was warm. Simon leaned forward. "What do you do?" "I'm a nurse," Adrian replied softly. The audience immediately reacted with appreciation. "And why are you here?" Simon asked. Adrian smiled gently. "Because I've spent years caring for other people's lives. I think it's time I take care of my dream." The crowd clapped. The music began. He chose "Can't Help Falling in Love." Hi. The lights were blinding. The crowd was ready. The first lyric had barely left his mouth when Simon leaned forward and said one word that echoed louder than any buzzer ever could. "Stop." 10 seconds. That's all it took for silence to swallow the entire theater of America's Got Talent. And in that silence stood a 22-year-old Filipino hotel janitor who had flown across the world with borrowed money and a suitcase full of belief. What happened next didn't just shock the judges. It changed how millions of people watching understood failure. Stay with me until the end of this story, because this one is different. This one isn't just about talent, it's about humiliation, pride, and the courage to stand still when everything inside you wants to run. And if stories like this inspire you, take a moment right now to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who needs this kind of reminder today. His name was Luis Ramirez. 22 years old. Born in a coastal town in Leyte, Philippines. Luis grew up surrounded by ocean wind and karaoke machines. In his neighborhood, every birthday party ended with someone singing an Elvis classic. His grandmother adored Elvis Presley. She used to say, "That man sings like he's telling you a secret." Luis listened carefully. At 8 years old, he stood on a plastic chair during a family reunion and sang "Love Me Tender." His voice wasn't powerful yet, but it was sincere. The adults laughed in surprise. His grandmother cried. But dreams in Luis's world were fragile. His father worked as a fisherman. Some months were good. Some months meant empty nets and empty plates. When Luis turned 16, he quit school to help support the family. He moved to Manila and found work as a hotel janitor. He cleaned rooms where wealthy guests left behind half-eaten meals and expensive perfumes. At night, after long shifts, he would sing quietly in empty hallways because the acoustics made his voice sound bigger than his reality. One evening, a foreign guest heard him singing while mopping the floor. Instead of complaining, the guest recorded him. Weeks later, the video circulated online with the caption, "The janitor with a golden voice." Filipinos abroad began sharing it, encouraging him, telling him to audition for AGT. Luis laughed at first. Him? On that stage? But his grandmother, now older and frail, held his hand one evening and said, "You don't belong in hallways. You belong where people listen." Those words followed him all the way to America. Backstage at AGT, Luis felt small. Other contestants had managers, stylists, backup dancers. He had a simple white blazer bought secondhand, black pants, and neatly combed hair styled in a modest Elvis-inspired wave. When he walked on stage, the applause was polite. Simon studied him. "What do you do?" "I clean hotel rooms," Luis answered honestly. "And why are you here?" Luis took a breath. "Because my grandmother believes I sing like I mean it." The audience melted a little. The music started. He chose Burning Love. The intro played. Luis tried to bring energy. He tried to move confidently. He tried to sound bold. But nerves attacked him instantly. His voice tightened. His movements felt rehearsed. He was trying too hard to impress. 10 seconds in. Stop. The word hit harder than any red buzzer. The music cut. The audience murmured. Luis's face flushed red. Simon leaned forward calmly. "I think you're trying to be something you're not," Simon said. "You don't need to entertain us. You need to show us who you are." The comment wasn't cruel. But it pierced. For years, Luis had felt invisible. And now, under the brightest lights of his life, he felt exposed. Simon continued, "Do you have another song?" Luis's throat felt dry. He could leave. He could apologize. He could let this be another story of almost. Instead, he closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother sitting by the radio. About hotel hallways. About singing to empty spaces. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd like to sing Can't Help Falling in Love." The band reset. The lights dimmed slightly. This time, Luis didn't move. He stood completely still. The first note came out gentle. Not forced. Not flashy. Just honest. The theater quieted instantly. When he sang the second line, something shifted. His voice carried warmth, the kind you don't learn from vocal lessons, but from life. He wasn't trying to sound like Elvis anymore. He was singing like Luis. The chorus arrived. His voice opened up, smooth, rich, emotional. Not explosive, but deeply controlled. By the time he reached the bridge, the entire audience was leaning forward. Heidi's eyes shimmered. Sophia held her breath. Howie whispered, "Oh my God." Simon didn't interrupt. The final note approached. Luis didn't oversing it. He let it float. Pure. Clear. Vulnerable. When the note faded, the silence was deafening. Then the audience erupted into a standing ovation. Luis stood there shaking. Simon spoke first. "That," Simon said slowly, "is why I stopped you." The crowd cheered louder. "You were hiding behind performance. But when you stopped performing and started feeling? That was beautiful." Luis covered his mouth, overwhelmed. For yes. Backstage, he broke down crying. When he video called his grandmother, she was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "You see," she whispered. They listened. As the competition continued, Luis became known as the voice from the hallway. Viewers connected deeply with his humility and sincerity. He didn't try to outshine anyone. He just sang with heart. In the semifinals, he dedicated a performance to invisible workers, cleaners, janitors, maintenance staff, the people who keep buildings shining but rarely receive applause. The video went viral globally. He didn't win the entire competition. But he won something just as powerful. He was offered recording deals, invitations to perform internationally. Hotels that once employed him now invited him as a guest performer. Months later, Luis returned to his hometown in Leyte. The entire community gathered by the shore for a free concert. Before singing his final song that night, he looked at the crowd and said, "I was stopped after 10 seconds. And for a moment, I thought that meant I wasn't good enough. But sometimes, being stopped is just life asking you to stop pretending." The crowd applauded. "You don't have to be louder," he continued. "You just have to be real." Maybe you needed to hear that today. Maybe you've been stopped. Maybe someone interrupted your dream before you could fully show it. But what if that interruption isn't the end? What if it's the moment that forces you to reveal your true voice? Luis got 10 seconds. And he turned it into a lifetime. If this story touched your heart, like this video so it can reach someone who feels invisible right now. Subscribe for more emotional stories that prove your background does not define your ceiling. And remember, if life stops you after 10 seconds, don't run. Stand still. And sing the truth. Musical notes.